Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Fuse AI into the CI/CD pipeline to optimize Selenium testing. I'm Joy Ruff, the Product Marketing Manager for the Enterprise Continuous Quality Suite at Parasoft, and Wilhelm Hocker, our Senior Solutions Architect for the Functional Tools, is here with me today. Companies are being driven to deliver high-quality applications, which in turn is driving the need for them to innovate in order to deliver a compelling customer experience. With disruption in nearly every market, competition has significantly increased. This pushes companies to add new features and capabilities to gain and retain their market share. The increase in offerings means that customers can make a switch to another vendor faster and cheaper than in the past. So providing a strong customer experience is crucial to a company's business success. How can you validate the customer experience? Test that it works, and test again that it still works. To deliver new capabilities and complete application testing in a timely manner, you need to have a CI/CD pipeline that incorporates CT, continuous testing with test automation. Many companies are still focusing primarily on UI testing, which has multiple challenges associated with it. For example, test creation is time-consuming. This can slow down releases or lead to poor quality tests. UI tests also take a long time to execute. These slow test runs can ruin developer productivity. Locators are required for browser interaction and assertions. And when the HTML DOM, or document object model, changes unexpectedly, your tests break, making them harder to maintain. Automated testing is a necessity for successful CI/CD environments, but constant false positives impact perceived application quality. Traditional automated testing frameworks are not built to detect modern app defects, and as a result, some defects can still slip into production, which can cause a poor customer experience. These issues can lead to a lot of test rework, reduced DevOps pipeline velocity, and ultimately delayed releases. You cannot deliver at the speed of Agile without test automation. To learn more about industry trends, Parasoft has asked the question, how are you testing your UI? Based on the survey data we've collected from over 3,000 responses, Selenium has a solid majority of the UI testing market, but Selenium itself has challenges. The results from our survey also show how many people are impacted by the challenges describing previously. Nearly half of those who answered the survey identified their biggest challenge as building tests that are maintainable, with test execution time next in line. The ability to handle UI and locator changes also ranks high on the list. Test creation falls a little bit lower down the list, but it may depend on a team's maturity as to which issues are indeed the most critical. For example, testers new to Selenium may find test creation to be a bigger issue. So let's consolidate and show these another way. With test maintenance involving several aspects, you need to be able to handle changes to the UI, weight conditions, and locators efficiently and effectively. You need the right level of visibility to debug and diagnose issues with the tests. It's also helpful to have a method for rerunning the tests that apply only to the things that have changed since the last build. And of course, you need a useful way to create the tests in the first place. Organizations waste time and money creating, triaging, and maintaining tests that fail to deliver on the promise of fast releases and better quality. To mitigate these challenges, you can integrate AI and machine learning into the CI/CD pipeline to make your Selenium tests more manageable. By shifting testing left in your workflow, you can achieve higher quality for your software applications. AI, or artificial intelligence, enhances automated web UI testing. AI capabilities can review the current state of test status, recent code changes, and other metrics, plus decide which tests to run and then run them. Machine learning can augment the AI by applying algorithms that allow the tool to improve automatically by collecting the large amounts of data produced by testing. There are numerous benefits to leveraging AI in software testing. It finds and fixes bugs faster and reduces the risk of human error. It identifies patterns to optimize test runs and reduce downtime. And it recognizes and handles change issues to improve DevOps productivity. This results in higher quality deliveries in less time and at lower cost. So my colleague Wilhelm will now demonstrate how you can address your top UI testing challenges with AI.
Thank you, Joy. And so today I'm going to be presenting multiple roles that are involved in software development and testing, starting with the manual tester. But we're also going to see the test automation engineer, DevOps engineer, as well as other stakeholders within a software project. So as a manual tester, here I am in Jira with the X-Ray test case management plugin installed. And I have this test plan for the Parabank web application that we're going to be testing today. And Parabank is a Java Spring based application. And so here in this test plan, I've got a test execution ready to go for me where I want to run my test and capture the outcome for this test account creation requirement. So we'll execute this manual test and jump into the Parabank UI where we'll go ahead and get started seeing how a manual tester can contribute to the test automation process that we have with Selenium. And so here we've got a Chrome extension where I can record UI actions for Parasoft Selenium. And we can also record API traffic for API testing in Parasoft SOA test. This will be a topic for our next webinar. So I'll start the recording and we're going to go in and test this requirement for creating a new account. I'm going to log in. We've got our accounts overview. And here I can see a link for opening a new account. $100 is going to be deposited when the account is created. And so here we've got our new account number. If we drill in, we can see the balance is $100. And our plugin here also lets us add assertions to a recording. So I could say, let's make sure the balance here is $100 when we get to this page. Now, I'll come back to the accounts overview and let's stop the recording. And what Selenium asks us for is the name of our test. So I'll call it account creation test. Put it this way, test account creation. And one of the features here is the ability to associate this test with a requirement that I have in Jira. And so if I come back, I can see that the requirement is par 56. So we can put in par 56, the URL, as well as the ID for this particular requirement. And I'm going to now download this recording so that I can pass it along to my test automation engineer colleague to take it from here. And so now that I've gone through this manual test, I'll mark this as okay. I'll pass this test. Now when we come back to my test execution, we'll go ahead and say that this is done now. So I've done my manual test. I've gone through the session. So now I'm going to switch gears and we're going to take a look at what a test automation engineer will do having received a recording that we just did. And so here I'm in Eclipse and I've got a project for Parabank where I have a number of Selenium tests that I've previously recorded. So for bill pay, requesting a loan, transferring funds. And so what I'm going to do is add this recording to my existing project that was created with Selenium. And we'll point to that recording file that the manual tester sent over. And we'll give our test class a name. So Selenium's test creation process here delivers Selenium Java projects that are organized with industry best practice page object model pattern. So supporting the open source Selenium API that's used by the majority of our industry, as Joy pointed out. And so what this means is you can use Parasoft Selenium with your existing Java-based Selenium projects without changing a thing. Selenium supports creating tests and running tests that use JUnit 4, JUnit 5, or TestNG. And yes, Cucumber is fully supported too. And as for IDEs, I'm in Eclipse now, but we also have support for IntelliJ. All right, so I've got my test here, and there are a couple things I want to do to um, make it consistent with the rest of my tests here, because we're also going to be looking at running this test from CI/CD. So let's get that set up. All right, so we've got our baseline URL. So this is our first build of Parabank we'll be looking at today. And we have all our steps documented. You'll notice here we added the JUnit assert equals method, checking that account activity page has $100 when we create the new account. And one thing that I want to check, knowing what I know about this account creation process, is when we come here and click this link, we want to make sure that we have a good locator for this link. And so I'm going to make sure that we've got a stable locator that's going to click not the account number that we saw on the UI, but we're going to use another attribute in the HTML for this link to be able to click it reliably. And so now I've got my test set up. It's integrated with my suite. So let's take a look and make sure that we've got all these tests passing. So I'll run the suite of tests and we will see um, the playback of these scenarios. All right, here browser is about to come up. I'll drag it over. So here's our first scenario. And we're logging in. We're applying for a loan. We have another scenario coming up. Here we're logging in and we're paying for a bill. All right, looks good. And as we go through these scenarios, what we're going to see in a moment is what happens when we try to run these tests with a new build of Parabank that development has recently promoted into my QA environment. And so here's our account creation test that we just recorded. And that all looks great. And we've got one final smoke test here, just logging in. All right, so all our tests are passing. That's good to see. Um, and so we're going to see Selenium AI twice here. Once right now from the test automation engineer's desktop experience. And then again, we're going to look at it from CI/CD and the DevOps engineer's experience as well. So when you run tests with Selenium, we have this analyzer report that has some good information for us. We'll be looking at this report again when we run our tests with the new version of Parabank. And so we've got our tests here. I'm going to run again now with the updated URL for Parabank. And so we'll see how good our tests are with these updates that development has promoted for us. Okay, so our first test here is going to be loan request. I'll bring the browser over. All right, so we're logging in here, and the request loan functionality, they added some dynamic loading of these objects in the UI, and it's causing our test to time out. So we didn't get through the whole test there. Let's look at this next one. Here we're paying a bill, and so we're getting through that, and we're stuck on phone number. So uh, they must have changed something with the front end code where the HTML has changed, right? And we're not finding that phone number field anymore. All right, so that's a maintenance issue we got to address. All right, transfer funds. That one looks okay. All right, creating new account. That looks okay. So the requirement that we built our test for is seems to be fine in the new environment. And then our last test run. So we've got a couple test failures here that we want to address in our project to make it up to date with the latest build of Parabank. And so right now we are running the Selenium analyzer that's going to be checking to see what it can offer us to reduce the maintenance cost associated with Selenium testing when we're constantly trying to keep our automated tests up to date here. And so here we're seeing that two of our tests failed. And in these cases, we also offer screenshots so you can see what the page looked like at the time of that particular failure. But what's even better is I can drill down into this and review the recommendations that the AI has given me, having analyzed previous test executions as well as this one. And so for our bill pay test, we have this name locator for payee phone number that didn't work with the new version of Parabank. And we have these recommendations. And so this confidence factor, it's coming from two places. We have a stability and a weight. So stability means the AI is looking back in time at previous test executions, and it's checking to see if this recommendation will have worked in those previous test runs. And so we know that this particular CSS locator will have worked in all of the runs that Selenium has in its history. Weight is a user configurable setting. Some testers have a preference for CSS locators versus XPath locators, or maybe that your application has very dynamic ID attributes for its elements. And so ID is a bad locator strategy, so you can deprioritize that. And so here with these recommendations, now I have a step forward without having to spend time debugging the issue. And with our IDE integration, we make it even easier for testers to maintain because here we've got that recommendation where I can click a button and it takes me directly to the locator code that we need to update. I can also see which test case ran that's resulting in this error. So we know it's coming from test bill pay, and we know this is the particular locator with the issue. And I can review the recommendations that the AI produced here in the IDE as well. And if I like this one, I can just click update and it'll quick fix my page object locator for me. And so, we've just done one example here, but you can imagine if you have many locators breaking from build to build and you're scrambling to keep your Selenium tests up to date so that development can keep getting their feedback quickly, this can add up to save a lot of time throughout the course of my daily work as a test automation engineer. So I'm going to revert that change because I also want to show us self-healing. And so if our AI is able to produce these recommendations for new locators, then it can also apply those recommendations right at runtime. And this is really helpful because we're running these tests in a CI/CD pipeline. And when a test breaks because a locator had an issue or a wait condition was not set properly, like in this case, we can see that it's waiting long enough and we're getting through that test. That can really slow down your progress because now the development team has to wait for another build to run where your Selenium tests will get through to completion. So here it was stuck on phone number before, but then we applied that recommendation at runtime and we got past that issue. These other tests will run. We know that they were working. So the two problematic tests we had, we're able to get through them and not lose our test run. And we're gonna review this again in a moment from the perspective of CI/CD as well. And once these tests finish, we're gonna look at that analyzer report and see what the report is showing us that's slightly different than what we had before. All right, so all our tests have run, and now the analyzer is kicking off. So we'll give that a moment. All right. And while that report comes up, I should also mention that these Selenium tests that we're running with Parasoft Selenic can also be configured to send the recorded API traffic for creating SOA tests. And so in the next webinar, we'll be exploring that in more detail. But if you have a large library of Selenium tests and you're looking to get a head start on an API testing initiative, that particular capability is going to be pretty useful for you. So here now we can see that those two tests have been healed. We're not calling them passed because we had to intervene to make them run to completion. And if we look at one of the recommendations here, the report is now telling us which locator it used to heal the test. So pretty cool functionality here to help us save time and keeping our tests up to date, as well as a nice recording capability where it's giving us Selenium code in industry best practice page object model. So it's going to be easier to integrate these recordings into your existing Selenium projects that you're maintaining. So now I'm going to switch hats yet again, and I'm going to enter the role of the DevOps engineer. And here I've got our Selenium project ready for automation. So we're going to review what optimizations Parasoft delivers for the CI/CD pipeline. And so I'm going to come in here and describe what I have going on with my orchestration. So what happens first is we have a build that's going to download the Parabank sources from our public GitHub project. And then we're going to essentially package the WAR file, deploy it to Tomcat, set up our coverage monitors, which I'll explain later, and then bring up Parabank, right, so we can test it. So Parabank demo, this is the job that kicks off our tests against the baseline build. Then we're pulling in the feature branch of Parabank, so these updates that development has been working on, package the WAR, deploy it into our other Tomcat that has that new build in there. And then we're going to run a series of tests and a series of jobs here. One where self-healing is not enabled, so we'll see those two tests failed. One with self-healing enabled, and then one with both self-healing and test impact analysis enabled. And I'll be explaining this shortly. And so what I want to point out is if you look at the difference between a normal test run and then a test run with self-healing, the execution times are pretty similar. So we don't have a large overhead associated with enabling self-healing and getting that functionality to save a test run that might fail for these maintenance issues we've been exploring. Um, and I also want to draw your attention here to our test impact analysis job that took less than half the time of the other runs. And so what we're doing with test impact analysis is we have a speed optimized job where when developers are doing feature branch testing, they don't want to wait for full regression cycles before they can discover that they broke something. And this development and testing in feature branches moves so fast. Even if you're parallelizing your full regression cycles with Selenium, that feedback delay can be too slow. And so with test impact analysis, we're not sacrificing quality for speed, and we're giving you the best of both worlds with a clever use of code coverage analytics. And I know there's always one person in the audience that says, show me the console output. And so for that one person, I'll show you the console output here so we can see what Selenium is doing. And you'll notice here, with our code coverage analytics, we're detecting that there was one class modified in the Parabank backend code tied to bill pay, as we'll see later. And as a result, one of our test cases has been impacted. And so we're detecting, based on the differences in the WAR file for a Parabank, what tests should be rerun, and so we don't have to guess anymore or just come up with like a core set of tests to run, but it's not the full suite. Now we're intelligently choosing which tests to rerun, so that we can develop these speed optimized jobs that are appropriate for these fast paced feature branch workflows. Okay. So I ran this job earlier, and so we've got the full run here. So I want to show you guys the Selenium Analyzer report for those three jobs that we have against that new version of Parabank. And so, right, we saw this from Eclipse, right? The first test, we had two tests pass, two tests fail. Well, we have a third one in Eclipse, right? The new one we created. Here we can see the self-healing kicked in. So we didn't lose the test run. And if you've got your CI/CD running nightly, let's say, this could cause you to lose a whole day of getting feedback to development. So adding self-healing into your Selenium automation process can pay big dividends in speeding up the velocity of your testing. And then here, notice we just ran one test, our bill pay test, because we detected this was the test that needed to be rerun based on the code changes in the WAR files of the two versions of Parabank that we've been testing. So really, really good optimizations we have for the DevOps engineer that's trying to support developers and testers and get them to deliver the functionality they're committing to with as few delays as possible. And so we added that new test for account creation. So what I'm going to do is rerun our job that kicks off the tests for the new build of Parabank. It's going to take about 2 minutes to complete. And while this is running, I want to introduce you to Parasoft DTP. And Parasoft DTP is your centralized view of quality and security for your software development projects. So now I'll be taking on the role of the various team leads and stakeholders of a project that care about quality and security analytics of their software that's under active development. And so here we can see I've got a dashboard that I've customized for our Parabank demo with a variety of reporting widgets that I'm going to walk us through. So here, quality status. This is an analytics widget that has policy checks against static code analysis results that are being published from Parasoft's award-winning language testing tools like JTest. We're also testing or adding policy checks for test status, as well as code coverage. And so, yes, besides just offering static code analysis, Parasoft's language tools also give you code coverage from unit testing and code coverage agents that you can instrument with your Java and .NET applications to analyze code coverage from functional testing. And we're going to come back to code coverage in a moment. Here I have our Jira test coverage widget. And so because the tests we've been running have been annotated with user stories in Jira, we can present your requirements traceability coverage using that test execution data from our automated tests, just like the ones we're running right now. And we're going to drill into this once our Jenkins job completes. Here, I've got a series of widgets about tests, how many were run, how many were passing and failing, and then stability, which is quite cool. This keeps track of what tests are unstable from build to build that are sucking up your time in the sprints. So these could be good opportunities to spend some time and figure out how to stabilize these tests. We have another one, test change, which is quite useful. This is where it keeps track of how many tests are being added and pruned as you compare between a baseline build and a target build. And so now I want to talk more about code coverage. And so here you'll notice that we have this total coverage, which is merged from coverage coming from the JUnit test cases that this project has. But it's also code coverage that's coming from our Selenium tests that we've been running. And so we can see that we've got 25.5% code coverage coming from our functional tests. And I can drill down into this and we can see some really nice details. For example, if I look at bill pay result, our Selenium test for bill pay, notice here also, we're correlating each test and how much coverage is coming from various tests. And so this lets developers and testers get a clear picture of where their code coverage from overall testing is coming from, and then more importantly, where it's not. So developers can now use this visibility to focus their limited time for unit testing to get maximum impact. And this is really the collaboration between QA and development that makes a big difference for agile and continuous quality improvement initiatives. All right. And then the last widget here for coverage, modified coverage. This is also a great tool for developers and engineering leads. This widget shows you how much code coverage you achieved, but only for the code that's been modified between that baseline build and target build. And so Parasoft's development teams use these features internally to make sure that any newly modified code for a sprint and for a release are going to meet certain policy thresholds for code coverage that our VP of development is setting. And so it's understandable, for example, that legacy projects spanning many years are going to accumulate technical debt and low code coverage. But with analytics like these, it should be very reasonable in these situations to expect that new code changes to these projects should be well tested and up to modern standards. And so Parasoft DTP helps teams continuously test their projects more efficiently with the help of analytics like these. Okay, so let's drill into our Jira traceability report. And we've got our test run it updated to 100%, which is good. And so here we can see all of our automated tests that are presented in context of the requirements that are being worked on for the current release of Parabank. And so in addition to just correlating tests, Parasoft's language tools can also add static analysis violations against industry standards like CWE Top 25, as well as file modifications that are correlated to requirements that are being worked on. And so this view can help team leads, product owners, and other stakeholders really drill down to see exactly what is changing and what risks are known for the requirements that they're focusing on. And with this latest build of Parabank, we can see that we have a couple tests that are failing that are impacting our requirements here. So if I drill down into one of these, DTP shows us the details for this particular requirement. And we have our test explorer that will show us the source code of our Selenium test. So we can see what this test is running. We see that it failed. We've got the stack trace and error message visible here as well as code coverage. As I mentioned, yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are correlating code coverage with functional tests, the Selenium test. So I have the ability to drill in and see for any particular class like admin, manager, impl, which lines of code are actually being touched by my Selenium test. An address here. And so with this information, I now have a nice workflow to say, yep, this test is identifying a problem with the new build. So why don't I just create a bug in Jira that links back to this test failure in DTP. So when this bug gets scheduled for a future iteration and a developer starts investigating it, they can quickly jump here into DTP, see the code coverage, see the error message and stack trace, see what the test code looks like, and start investigating what went wrong. So a lot of useful information here. And so let's end the session kind of where we started, which is back in Jira here. And so what I want to show you is we've got some X-ray reports that we'll review. So the first one, test execution report. You'll notice that we're automatically adding test executions from our Jenkins pipeline, and then the test results are being published into X-ray. So you now have a centralized place where your manual testing sessions and your automated test results are getting aggregated for review. And then, of course, X-ray offers a traceability report as well that will look similar to what DTP is presenting. So here we can see for the account creation requirement, here is the test that DTP added in Jira. And so, right, we've got some details. This test was automatically created by Parasoft DTP. It has some data about the test, right? And we can see that this test passed in our latest run. And if we and so we have this full traceability now for your test case management. I should mention Parasoft DTP also supports Azure DevOps version 1, Jama Connect, TeamForge, Polarian ALM, and CodeBeamer ALM. And so if you've been watching this wondering, well, I don't use Jira and X-Ray, we've got a variety of systems that we support. And so what I've shown you today in Jira, you can expect the same functionality for those other systems as well. Okay, Joyce, so that's what I had to cover for us today. So let me pass it back to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Wilhelm. So Wilhelm just showed you a whole lot of great things. And he started with using the Parasoft recorder to capture the actions during a manual test and create a Java-based Selenium test script using the page object model. These scripts are not vendor locked. They are fully portable for use in your CI/CD workflow. You can create new Selenium projects from scratch or add new tests to existing projects, and then integrate those tests into your CI/CD process. With a one-line code change added to your existing test script, you can activate the self-healing capability, which stops your CI/CD process from artificially breaking. Use this self-healing to patch your runtime issues on the fly and generate recommendations based on those patches. That feedback goes back into your IDE so that you can see what your options are and choose what fixes to implement to make your Selenium tests more stable and easier to maintain. You also heard that Wilhelm used annotations in the tool to enable traceability between tests and code. Additionally, he showed how to use test impact analysis to reduce the amount of time spent rerunning tests due to changes in the code. The results of your test automation can also be sent to Parasoft's Reporting and Analytics dashboard in DTP. And here they are combined with other test and quality data such as unit testing and code analysis, and also cross-correlated with the user stories or test artifacts managed by Jira or X-Ray or other systems. This gives you full visibility to see the test success status, the impact of any test failures, and your level of test coverage and completeness. So in this demonstration, we've addressed all the UI testing challenges that were previously discussed. With Parasoft Selenium, you can confidently and rapidly create and maintain Selenium tests within your CI/CD or IDE environment using the simple plugin. Use AI and machine learning to repair broken tests with fixed recommendations. Run tests with automatic self-healing to minimize test instability and reduce failures in the CI/CD process. View reports with test results to get a clear view of your application coverage and determine where you need to focus your efforts for the next build. You can also identify performance insights and potential test issues with high runtimes to understand the risk of performance issues and the impact of test failures. And make the creation of Java-based Selenium tests much easier by recording UI interactions and leveraging the Parasoft Recorder for API test generation as well. With no vendor lock, these page object model UI tests are easier to work with. And only rerun the tests that are impacted by changes, executing tests in a smart way to reduce the amount of time needed to test incremental builds. So together, these AI-powered capabilities in Parasoft Selenium can help you streamline your Selenium web UI testing and give you measurable results, including up to 50% reduction in build failures, 80% reduction in test maintenance time, and 30% faster test creation. Partner with Parasoft to see significant improvements in your UI test automation. If you're ready to try Selenium for yourself, you can register to access our free 7-day trial. If you're interested in taking the next step on your testing journey to explore API testing, be sure to sign up for next month's webinar, Get Smart, Use Simulation to Accelerate API Testing. Learn more about adding AI-powered automated testing to your software development workflow in our blog on AI and software testing. Parasoft continues to research further applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning to augment our software testing platform. Learn more in our solution brochure. Go to our website to access blogs, white papers, and other useful resources, and contact us with any questions. We're a little over time, but let's take a few minutes to take your questions about today's topic.
All right, I see, Joy, we have a question from someone in the audience. Actually, a couple questions from them.
Great.
So, does the AI also troubleshoot errors outside of test cases, like outdated dependencies in the POM or Chrome version being different? And so, from a Selenium perspective, we're not analyzing any of the POM dependencies. If Chrome driver doesn't support the version of Chrome that you're testing, that the tests fail right away. So that's I think a quick fix to address in a Selenium project. But this brings up an interesting question because outdated dependencies and potential security vulnerabilities in those dependencies of the software that you're testing is something that Parasoft DTP supports. So we integrate with the OWASP dependency check plugin, which will check your open source dependencies for known vulnerabilities in the national vulnerability database. And we can integrate that data so you can stay on top of those dependencies you have for your software projects as one of the many reporting analytics that DTP provides for your software. Does the extension save the element IDs in an object repository folder? And so what we saw when we created our test in Selenium is that it's using the page object model pattern. And so what that means is each page that you're visiting with your Selenium test will have its locators embedded in that page object class. And so if you want to create a new test and maybe not go through a recording, but just build it by hand because you're a seasoned Selenium user, you can reuse those page objects that have been created from previous recordings without having to go through a recording or anything like that. Okay. And I see one more question here. How flexible or extendable is DTP? And so one of the nice capabilities we have in DTP is its extension designer. And so we have customers that integrate quality and security data from a variety of systems that they use and bring that data into DTP alongside with the data that Parasoft tools are publishing, like code coverage, test results, static analysis, etc. So DTP can definitely be extended by our customers for whatever data they need to pull in that helps them make engineering and prioritization decisions for their software.
Okay, well,
All
thank you,
right.
Wilhelm. Thanks to the audience for all the great questions. Thank you, Wilhelm, for all the answers and the thorough demonstration. For those of you still with us, if you'd like to see a more detailed and personalized demonstration, please contact us online at the link shown here, parasoft.com/contact, and we'd be happy to work with you on that. Thanks for attending today.